Welcome to the deep dive. For ages, we've kind of treated cities like they're just, for us humans, concrete, steel, pretty predictable places. And when we picture wildlife making it here, we usually think of, well, simple stuff, right? Like pigeons finding a spot on a fire escape.
Yeah, that's the common picture, but actually if you dig into the research, like the papers you sent over, it's clear that for the animals that do manage to thrive in our cities, well, the city is anything but simple or sterile. It's maybe the most powerful selective force on Earth right now. We're basically watching evolution happen in fast forward.
Exactly. And that's what we're really getting into today. We're looking past just, behavioral tweaks. We're diving into the deep stuff, the physiological changes, the cognitive shift, even the genetics that are being rewritten by city life, especially things like the urban heat island and weird new food sources.
hmm So our plan is to look closely at three really different examples. We've got lizards, squirrels, and a tropical bird. And through them, we want to unpack the really complex trade-offs these animals face. It's a whole new rule book for survival they're dealing with.
Okay, let's kick off with maybe the most obvious urban stressor, heat, that whole urban heat island thing, and how it's impacting the Puerto Rican crested anole lizard. Seems like a pretty stark case.
It really is. Anoles are ectotherms, right? They depend on the outside temperature, and critically, they lay their eggs in the ground. So those embryos, super vulnerable to whatever the soil temperature is doing.
And the research showed this kind of double-edged sword with city heat, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. On one side, the average soil temp in the city is warmer, and that actually speeds up development. City eggs hatched something like 8 days faster than the forest ones, which, sounds great, a head start.
Seems like a clear win.
Yeah.
Faster hatching, more generations.
You'd think so. But then there's the hidden danger, these short, really intense heat spikes. The urban heat island isn't just about averages, it's about extremes.
And the numbers were pretty shocking. They recorded soil temps hitting, what was it, 43 degrees Celsius.
43°C. Yeah, incredibly hot for an egg in the ground. And just being exposed to that one peak temperature, it slashed egg survival by almost a quarter, up to 24%.
Wow.
And here's the kicker. You might expect the city lizards being exposed more often to maybe have evolved some tolerance. Nope. The embryos from the city populations were just as vulnerable to that extreme heat as the forest ones. No sign of adaptation or even quick acclimatization to that specific stress.
So living in the city didn't make them tougher against the worst heat spikes.
Not for that extreme peak, no. And for the ones that did manage to survive that 43-degree spike, there was a lasting physiological cost. You picked up on the heart rate detail.
Yeah, tell us about that. It sounded significant.
It was. So 24 hours after surviving the heat spike, their resting heart rates were way lower. Significantly lower than control groups, and even lower than their own baseline before the heat.
Okay, so what does that mean? Lower heart rate? Sounds maybe less stressed?
Not quite. It's just they went into what's called metabolic depression.
Metabolic depression.
Yeah.
Okay, break that down. That sounds bad.
It's a pretty drastic survival strategy. Think of it like the lizard hitting an emergency system shutdown. They massively drop their metabolic rate, how much energy they're burning, just staying alive, basically, to conserve resources and just ride out the stress.
But that can't be good long term.
No, it comes with huge costs. Slower reaction times, less energy for finding food, growth basically halts.
Okay.
So yeah, they survived the heat spike itself, but they came out the other side seriously impaired.
So the city offers this potential speed boost hatch faster, but it comes with this constant threat of being cooked, basically. And even if you survive getting cooked, you're running on fumes afterwards because your metabolism tanked. What a trade-off.
A really tough one for ectotherms, definitely. Okay, so that's how a cold-blooded animal deals with it. But what about something that regulates its own temperature? An endotherm. Let's look at the Eurasian red squirrel study.
Right. This one looked at resting metabolic rate, or RMR, which is, for anyone listening, basically the energy an animal burns just existing when it's at rest, comparing city squirrels to forest ones.
Exactly. And unlike the anoles, which seemed mostly just vulnerable, the squirrels showed clear signs of metabolic acclimatization, adjusting. So the urban squirrels, their RMR didn't increase as steeply when the temperature dropped. Meaning when it got cool, specifically below about 18 or 19 degrees Celsius, they used less energy to stay warm compared to the forest squirrels. They kind of recalibrated their internal thermostat for better efficiency in the cold, saving energy.
Okay, that sounds like a definite advantage. Being more efficient at staying warm in a city, especially maybe in winter, that's a win.
It seems like one, yeah. But like with the lizards, there was a catch. That adjustment wasn't free, because the pattern flipped when it got warmer. Above that 18-19 degree point, the city squirrels actually had a higher RMR.
Wait, so they burn more energy when it's warm?
Seems like it. It suggests they're actually working harder, burning more fuel just to get rid of excess heat compared to the forest squirrels.
Huh. So saving energy when it's cool, but spending extra energy when it warms up. That points to maybe struggling with the temperature swings in the city overall. And this connects to that paradox you mentioned, right? About their food and body condition.
Exactly. Because cities often have tons of extra food for squirrels, bird feeders, dropped food, garbage, a buffet, seemingly. But despite that, the researchers found the urban squirrels were actually lighter and in poorer body condition than the forest ones.
That just doesn't track, does it? More food should mean healthier squirrels. So what's the theory? Are they just burning through all the calories dealing with the heat or stress, or maybe the food quality is bad?
It probably points to a combination of things. Maybe the human food isn't actually great quality for them, lots of fat and sugar, not the right nutrients. Or maybe the sheer energetic cost of living in the city, dodging traffic, dealing with noise, and constantly adjusting their metabolism for those temperature fluctuations, especially the heat, it just outweighs the benefit of the extra calories. The energy they save being efficient in the cold might just get immediately burned off trying not to overheat later.
Okay, that ties the physiological cost together really well. So we've seen bodies struggling with the city climate. But survival isn't just about tolerating the physical environment. It's also about brains, right? Being smart enough to find the food in the first place. Let's switch gears to cognitive flexibility. And who better to talk about than the ultimate urban opportunist, the raccoon?
Raccoons are perfect for this. Cities constantly throw new puzzles at them, like how do you get into this weirdly latched dumpster? That requires innovation.
And the researchers had a clever setup for this, didn't they? Using those puzzle boxes out in the wild.
Yeah, really neat. They used these multi-compartment boxes with different kinds of latches, like a swivel one, a sliding bolt, things like that. And they used RFID tags, like the chips and pets, to know which raccoon was interacting with the box and whether they solved it.
So what predicted success? Which raccoons figured out the box?
Well, about 23% of them managed to solve the first single solution box. And the best predictor wasn't age or sex, it was something they called exploratory diversity.
Exploratory diversity. What does that mean for a raccoon? Just trying lots of stuff.
Pretty much, yeah. It was the total number of different behaviors a raccoon tried on the box during its first encounter. Pushing, pulling, biting, manipulating different parts. The more varied its attempts, the higher its chance of stumbling onto the solution. It's basically a measure of persistent, varied trial and error.
That really backs up that old idea, necessity is the mother of invention, doesn't it? You mentioned something about juveniles being better at this.
That's right. The juveniles actually showed more exploratory diversity, and a higher percentage of them solved the box, about 32% of juveniles versus only 15% of adults.
Why would that be?
The thinking is it's about motivation. Juveniles are often lower on the social ladder, maybe not getting the best resources, so they tend to be in poorer physical condition. That hunger, that necessity might drive them to take more risks, expend more energy trying absolutely everything on a potential food source like the puzzle box.
So being hungrier makes you more curious and more willing to try and fail, essentially.
Interesting.
But okay, solving one puzzle is one thing. What about adapting, being flexible?
Good point. And the successful raccoons showed that too. On the box with multiple different latch types, the ones that solved it usually managed to open several different kinds. They weren't just one-trick ponies.
They could apply the learning.
Exactly. And there was this fascinating bootstrapping effect. The easiest latch on the box was a simple swivel latch. That one was opened first and most often. And getting that initial success seemed crucial.
Ah, so cracking the easy one gave them the confidence or maybe the insight to tackle the harder ones.
Precisely. That small win with the swivel latch seemed to enable raccoons that might have otherwise given up to keep trying, learn the principle, and then apply it to the trickier latches. It's kind of a fundamental learning process, right? Small successes building competence for bigger challenges. The city rewards that kind of rapid learning.
Makes sense. What about competition? Did they learn from each other or get in each other's way?
Well, what the analysis of their sequences of action showed was actually individuality. Individual raccoons tended to have their own preferred methods, their own style of tackling the box, and they stuck to it. High repeatability. And interestingly, this individual specialization became even more pronounced when there was more competition around the box.
So instead of fighting, they sort of specialized. Like, okay, you do the bolt, I'll work on the swivel.
Kind of. Developing your own reliable niche technique seems to be a strategy to reduce direct conflict when resources are limited. If everyone has their own little specialty, maybe there's less head-to-head fighting.
That's really cool. High pressure leads to more distinct individual strategies.
Okay.
Okay, fascinating cognitive angle. Now let's go even deeper. From behavior and physiology right down to the genes. Let's talk about the neotropical bananaquid.
Right. Coriba flaviola. This bird lives in some noisy places, urban areas where they're dealing with constant acoustic and visual pollution. The study mentioned noise levels up to 66 decibels in some city sites. That's pretty loud, like a vacuum cleaner running nearby all the time.
Yeah, not peaceful. So researchers looked at their genomes comparing city birds and rural birds.
They did, using RADZEC analysis. And they found clear genetic differences, signatures of recent strong selection acting on the urban birds. Specifically, they flagged 46 different locations in the genome that seemed to be under selection in the city populations.
46. Wow. Were they the genes you'd immediately guess? Like maybe related to hearing or dealing with stress?
Some were related to stress, yes, but others were maybe less expected, and they showed us how broad the impact of city life is. For instance, they found selection acting on genes involved in fundamental things, like lipid storage, how the body handles fat, and also insulin signaling.
Okay, fat storage and insulin.
Hmm.
That sounds like diet again, right? Like the squirrels.
Exactly. It strongly suggests the birds are rapidly adapting genetically to deal with the different types of food available in cities, often more sugary, fatty human scraps compared to their natural diet.
So we saw the squirrels struggling metabolically, maybe due to diet. But here with the bananaquits, it looks like there's actual genetic evolution happening to better process those city foods. What else was under selection?
Well, fitting with the stress idea, they also found selection on genes related to the immune system and dealing with oxidative stress. This really points towards a general, maybe universal pressure in urban environments linked to things like pollution, disease exposure in dense populations, chronic stress, needing a genetic toolkit for just better overall resilience.
Okay, so genetic tweaks for diet, for immunity, for stress. But what about the obvious behavioral stuff? Like we know city birds often change their songs to be heard over traffic noise. Is there a genetic link there too?
Yes, and this is maybe the most direct connection between the genes and the behavior we can observe. They found signatures of selection in genes that are involved in the development of the nervous system.
Ah, so impacting the brain and how it works.
Potentially, yes. The research suggests that the behavioral changes we see, like shifting song frequency or maybe being bolder around humans, aren't just the birds learning or reacting in the moment, pure plasticity.
The genes themselves might be changing to make them better at being flexible.
That's the idea. The city isn't just selecting for one specific trait, like a higher pitched song or better fat storage. It seems to be selecting for the underlying genetic foundation that allows for greater behavioral flexibility overall. Selection for the capacity to change, to adapt quickly.
Okay, this has been really illuminating. Looking across these different animals, the anole, the squirrel, the raccoon, the bananaquid, the evolutionary pressure cooker of the city is just intense, and it's hitting them from all sides.
It really brings it together, doesn't it? The big picture is that cities are these incredibly potent evolutionary laboratories running experiments in real time. And to actually succeed in a city, it seems like animals need to adapt on multiple fronts simultaneously. It's not just one thing.
Right. You've got to be able to survive the sheer physical extremes, like those anole wolves facing heat spikes that force them into metabolic shutdown.
Uh-huh. And you need sophisticated, flexible problem-solving skills, like the raccoons mastering those puzzle boxes, learning from small wins, and even specializing under pressure.
And then, underpinning all that, you might need rapid genetic shifts that boost general resilience and this capacity for plasticity, like we're seeing hinted at in the bananaquits adapting to diet, stress, noise.
It makes you realize the species that truly thrive in cities aren't just getting by. They are fundamentally being reshaped by the urban environment, physiologically, cognitively, genetically, all woven together.
So we've seen lethal heat spikes for the lizards, complex problem solving driven by new food sources for the raccoons, genetic changes possibly boosting adaptability in the bananaquits. I think the biggest takeaway here, for you listening, is how cities seem to be selecting really strongly for plasticity itself, the ability to change.
Yeah, that feels like the crux of it. As our cities keep expanding and climate change likely makes things like heat waves even worse, maybe the species that make it long-term will be the ones that have simply evolved the genetic architecture to adapt faster, to basically change as quickly as the environment around them is changing. That inherent ability to pivot, Maybe that's the ultimate ticket into the urban jungle for any species.